Not many people know this about me, but I grew up in a haunted house. Hi, I'm Neferkefri, your hostess with the Ghostess. You're watching True Tales of the Paranormal. Thank you for all my returning subscribers, and thank you to all my new subscribers. Now for today's True Tale of the Paranormal. I was raised in a home in northern Illinois, and it was a 4-story house on a suburban street. And we had a full-size attic, full-size second floor, first floor, and a full-size basement. Now, my home was just like any other typical neighborhood home on my street. Nothing weird about it, nothing abnormal ever occurred there as far as anyone knows. My parents purchased the home in the early 60s from the original owner, who was also the man who built the home. And so I was growing up there. Everything was uneventful until I was about 5. The first instance there was something weird about our home occurred when I started seeing a little boy. And this little boy, he was dressed in, at the time I didn't realize, was an old-timey school uniform. He had a little brown cap on, white starched shirt, a thin black tie, a little brown jacket, little brown shorts, and little brown shoes. He was my age. He seemed to be 5, just like me, and he told me his name was George. And I was raised an only child. And at that young age, before starting school, I didn't have very many friends, just a couple of friends in the neighborhood who lived really close to me. So I wouldn't say I was lonely, but my parents did raise me to have many interests, and they were very active in my upbringing. So I was never really bored, per se, maybe a little lonely at that age. And so I started telling my mom at meals, oh, please set a plate for George. He likes peanut butter and jelly. And Mom would kind of laugh and say, okay, George. And she'd make a little sandwich just for him. And of course, it would just sit there on the plate, and my mom or my dad would eat it, you know. Well, a little bit of time goes by, and George is coming around pretty much every day now. And one day I'm in the backyard with my grandpa, and I go into that experience in this video here because my grandpa could see George. So are imaginary friends really imaginary? You be the judge. Check out this video after you finish this one. So that was the first time there was any inkling in my worldview that there was something bizarre about my home. Now fast forward, and I'm about 10. We had a very small garage at the back of our property that had one large space where you could park one car. And then the other half of the garage was a 2-room kind of mini studio apartment. So the first room, as you walked in, you'd have the kitchen counters along the left-hand side of the room, and next to that was an antique stove that my parents turned around and ended up selling for about $5 grand years later. And on the right, there was a small sink. And then next to the sink was a doorway that led to the second room, which was a small bedroom, small closet, and a fully exposed toilet. And that was it. And when my parents bought the home, the original owner told us that his brother-in-law had lived in that small little apartment for a time. That's all we knew about those 2 rooms. Well, that apartment always gave me the creeps. I never wanted to be in there alone because I always felt watched, and I always felt that whoever or whatever was watching me did not want me there. So I'm about 9, and there was a family of girls who moved into our neighborhood about 2 doors down from me. It was 5 girls, and I played with the 3 middle girls because the youngest was too young and the oldest was too old. And they were great friends of mine. And one day I'm playing with just one of them in the little garage apartment there, and we were coloring at a table my dad had brought in from his workplace when they didn't want this table anymore. And it was a big square table on a pedestal. And he had to dismantle it to get it through that little door leading to the second room. So it's in there now all set up for my friends and I. We'd have our little tea parties in there and eat snacks and color and all that sort of thing. So my friend Angie and I were in there and we're coloring and we get thirsty. And I say, oh, well, let me go into the house and get us some juice. She's like, okay. And she didn't want to come with me, so I left her out there alone. Well, I am about to walk out the side door with the juice in my hands. She comes running in, almost knocks it out of my hands, and she's just crying, just a torrent of tears. And I'm like, what's wrong? What's wrong? You know, I figured she'd gotten hurt, you know. And she goes, there's a man, there's a man. And I'm like, there's a man? Oh my God. Now my dad at the time, and for years and years, worked 2 jobs. And he happened to be home in between jobs for his dinner right about that same time. So we were really lucky. So he overheard Angie. So he comes running. He says, where is he? Where is he? Where'd you see him? And Angie's crying. He's in the garage. He's in the garage. And Dad goes rushing out there. He comes back and he says to Angie, what did he look like? There's no one there now. And Angie says, well, yeah, there's no one there now because he faded away right in front of me. And she had been so upset, she had been unable to give us that vital detail. And my dad was like, what did he look like? And Angie told him. My dad, I am Mexican-American. My dad, full-blooded Mexican. So he had a little bit of a darker complexion than I do. And when my dad would get really, really, really upset about something, he would turn slightly green around the mouth. It was the weirdest thing. Well, I saw him go slightly green when Angie described the man to him. And she could only see him from the waist up. That was another thing. It was not a full body apparition, but it was a solid apparition. And she said she was so shocked from seeing this man. He was standing in the doorway between the kitchen and that bedroom. So basically totally blocking her exit. There was no other way out of that 2-room efficiency apartment. She said she didn't realize until she had run back inside my house that she could only see the man from the waist up. His legs were missing. And then plus, of course, he faded away in front of her, thus giving her the gumption to run through the doorway he had just been blocking to run back into my house. And I started telling my parents, you see, that's why I don't like to play out there by myself. Because they would tell me once in a while, if I was a little bit too loud or something, you know, why don't you go play out in the garage? I'm like, not unless I've got a friend. Well, go get a friend and go out in the garage. And I would, but I'd never go alone. So that happened when I was about 10. My friend was 9. She was a year younger than I was. Now, fast forward, and now I'm either 19 or 20. And I have a dog, an Australian Shepherd named Desiree. And if you want to learn about a story about her, check this out here. But after this video is over. All these links will also be below in the description. So my dog Desiree and I, extremely close. She was definitely my dog. She loved my parents too, but I mean, the dog just, you know, the sun and moon rose and set on my shoulders for this dog. She would have done anything for me. The only thing she would not do for me, that's my cat Blue Star. You'll have to excuse her. Every time I record, she wants to be in on the video, so she hollers. Anyway, the only thing my dog Desiree would not do for me, she would not set foot in that garage apartment. Now, as you came into the garage itself, you had to walk through the spot where my parents parked their car. Then there was a little wooden step there, and you take that step and then go through the door and step into that little apartment. Well, Desiree would not step into that apartment at all. She would lay across the threshold on that large wooden step and wait for my friends and I to come out. She would never go in, and we would coax her. We would try to tempt her with treats and nothing doing. She would not go in that garage. So I had to go out there alone one day Like I said, I was 19 or 20 at the time, and Desiree was like she was six or seven. So we head on out to the garage because I'll be darned if I'm going to go there alone. And I know she's not going to enter that apartment with me. She's going to lay across the threshold like she always has. So I go in and I say, okay, Desi, you stay here now. And she lays down just like she would always do. I go into that second room, and I've got my dad's little toolbox, and I have to take the tabletop off the pedestal to be able to pull it through that narrow doorway between the kitchen area and that small bedroom. And I knew this going in. I was going to have to take it apart. And my idea was I wanted to put it in the basement. I was no longer doing my artwork or anything out there. And I wanted my mom to have a better area in the basement where she could, fold clothes after doing the laundry. So I go in there and I flip the table over, and I'm down there and I'm undoing the bolts that hold the pedestal onto the base of the tabletop. All of a sudden, I hear from Desiree. And she was the sweetest dog. I mean, the only other time I ever heard her react that way was in the video I pointed you to earlier about her. So you'll have to check that one out. So right away I look, and in the kitchen area, looking like he was just leaning back with his elbows on the kitchen counter like this, was this man who looked as solid as I look to you right now. And I mean, my heart, if I was ever going to have a heart attack, it would have been at that moment. My heart did something it's never done. I can't even describe what it did. And he was looking me right in the eye, making 100% eye contact. And I just remember not even saying anything, but thinking it, Jesus, oh, please, Jesus, get this man out of here. And all of a sudden he just disappeared. He didn't fade. It was like someone flipped a switch. And at the time, it didn't even really equate to me as a ghost, because again, just like when my friend Angie saw him, first of all, he looked completely solid. And I honestly thought for years and years after, he had somehow gotten out of the garage, because he was leaning with his elbows on the counter about 2 feet from the door leading out of that little apartment. And I figured I must have blinked, and he darted. He jumped over my dog and darted. And why didn't my dog ever chase him down? I don't know. And so I'm running into the house, yelling and screaming and telling my mom this. And at the time that this incident occurred, my dad was not at home. So she's freaking out, and she says, I'm calling the police. They need to come and check that out. Your dad's not going to be home till 10 because he had just started his second job. So she calls the cops, and they come out, and they go out there and they look around, and they come back in. They say, we're sorry, ma'am, talking to my mom. We don't see anything. There's no sign of a trespasser. If you feel comfortable, here's the number for the non-emergency. You call us, give them this case number, and we'll come right back out immediately. And she was like, thank you, officers. And they left. And then I remembered my friend Angie. And I was like, I wonder if that's the same man Angie saw. But then I thought, well, no, because what Angie saw was definitely a ghost. I could not comprehend that I also had seen a ghost. My brain kept telling me it was a real man, and he had somehow darted out, like I said, jumped over my dog's reclining body and ran for it. But I never heard anything. And the area where my parents would park their car had very fine gravel. Anytime you walked across there, even a little kid walking across there, you made noise. And I remember thinking back on the incident, I never heard a sound. And again, my dog never took off after him, but she did growl at him. I guess when he first appeared in that little apartment, she must have seen him materialize or something, because I only noticed him when I heard her growl. So there was that little incident in the garage. So then my dad comes home from work that night, and I'm getting ready for bed. And I can hear him and my mom talking excitedly in Spanish. My dad was not 100% bilingual. And so whenever they would have private conversations or something important that, 100% comprehension was vital, they would speak in Spanish. So my mom's going after him in Spanish. I'm blah, 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 this, I'm blah, 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 no, 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 hombre, hombre. And I'm like, oh yeah, they're talking about the man in the garage that I saw, Now my dad comes, he knocks on my bedroom door, and he says, can we talk a second? I said, sure. And he says, what did you see? And I described the man to him. And for the second time, concerning the garage, I saw my dad go green around the sides of his mouth. And I was like, Dad, what's wrong? You did this when Angie saw a man in the garage. Is it the same man? And he kind of looked down like this. And when he did that gesture, I knew he was considering his words carefully. Because like I said, he wasn't 100% bilingual, but he also didn't want to say anything to scare or upset me. And he's doing this, I don't know, quite a few seconds before he finally looked up, locked eyes with me. And he says, I'm pretty sure you saw a ghost. I'm like, no, it couldn't have been a ghost. And, because I had never seen anything ghost-like in my home, except for the time my friend Jimmy and I, when we were little, were playing in a vacant upstairs apartment that my parents were renting out. And we saw a disembodied body part laying up there. And that is here. You'll want to check that out too after this video. Then, of course, I thought, thinking back on it as an adult, I realized what my brain was doing. It was telling me what I saw was a real person so that I wouldn't be afraid of my own house. That's clearly how my brain was operating. Because my bedroom was in the back of the house, so it was the room in the house besides the kitchen walk-in pantry that was the nearest to the garage. And I realize now, had I believed that figure was a ghost, I pretty much would have been afraid to sleep in my own bed. So I think that's why my psyche was just so adamant in denying the paranormal reality of the situation and was striving to make the situation as normal as possible, even though it was still threatening. But it was a threat that was within some modicum of personal control, meaning, you call the cops on a trespasser. You run in your house, you lock your doors, your dog sits at alert, that sort of thing. So I just told him, I said, no, that had to have been a real man. And he was like, I don't think so. He says, but whatever, you and your mom, you did the right thing. He ever comes back and I'm not here, to call the police again. And that was the end of that particular discussion. Like I said, at the time of my weird experience in the garage, I was either 19 or 20. Then about 2 years later, I'm in our dining room. Our dining room overlooked our backyard, which was pretty much a side yard because directly behind the house, we had two tenants who lived upstairs and they would park their two cars directly behind the house. Then just past their cars was our small garage. So we had a side yard that came up. We also had a small front yard. The dining room windows face the side yard. And I'm there at the typewriter typing away some homework assignment from college. I attended Northwestern in Evanston, Illinois, majored in anthropology there. And a movement caught my eye through the window in the yard. Now these windows, this is a very much older home. My parents sold it in, I think it was the year 2000. By then, that house was 90 years old when they sold it. So, really old home, a lot of history, but again, nothing out of the norm as far as anybody knew. So I'm sitting there and I see this movement, and the windows were up high on the wall. They were about 3 feet, no, not 3, about 2.5 feet high to where you get the windowsill. Now remember, I said earlier in the video, we had a full-size basement. Well, the basement ceiling reached up to about 2 feet high along the exterior of the house. And then you get the flooring for the first floor. So the windowsill, if measured from the ground outside, was close to 5 feet high. These were high windows. And what I saw was at the top of the lower half, the lower pane of the window. Our windows had 2 panes in them, a top and a bottom. The movement that I saw was at the upper half of that lower pane. We're talking minimum six feet above the ground. And it looked like I saw like a pinkish shoulder go by. And I looked because we had this bay window here, and I could follow the movement. And then I went running out there with my dog. You want to see that story? Check it out here. And that one was corroborated a few days later by a neighbor across the street who saw what I saw. Inside, outside, a lot of weirdness surrounding my home. And that's not all of it. If you'd like to see the story of what my little friend Jimmy saw near the summer solstice one summer day in June, check this out. A lot of video cards connected with this story, let me tell you, because a lot of things happened, a lot of little weird things. And the last thing I'll report on occurred when I was about 30. And I was attending graduate school at the time at the University of Texas in Austin, where I received my doctorate in Latin American studies. My background is anthropology, archaeology, and art history. And so I had gone home for break, and it was winter break. And so I'm sitting on the couch with my dad, and we're watching one of the Star Trek movies on cable TV. And off to the right of the living room, there's an alcove, and next to the alcove is their master closet, okay? That had a good, strong, heavy wooden door. Remember, this house at the time my parents sold it in the year 2000 was 90 years old. So this is back when they built houses to last. And our house never had any structural problems whatsoever. It was so wonderfully built. So that closet door is sitting there completely shut, right? There was never anything weird about that closet at all. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I could see the garage door slowly open. Here's the door. And it just slowly opens. And I look and I go, and Dad, his whole body had been oriented toward the TV, which was off to our left. So he's seen my reaction to something over here, right? So he spins around and looks in time to see the door finishing its outward swing. He turns to me and he says, "Oh, it's the ghost." I'm like, "What?" And he says, "Don't worry about it. It happens sometimes." That was my dad, you know. The weirdness of our home, it never struck any of us as being in any way really threatening or dangerous. It was just a bizarre house. And I really think our house was either built on a ley line, or perhaps there was a portal to the other side there, because of all the weirdness that happened, not only in the house, but outside the house, in the backyard, in the garage. But who knows? And if you find this interesting, I have another story, not linked here because I haven't filmed it yet. I'm going to get ready to film it. It'll be coming up in a video or two of a new resident ghost in that house. So if you want to watch that one, please subscribe, hit the like button, drop a comment, let me know what you thought of this one, all right? I thank you so much for watching. This is Nefer Kefri, your hostess with the ghostess. You've been watching True Tales of the Paranormal. I'm wishing you a blessed day ahead.